New York's infamous Blue Note era comes to Mars Hill January 24th for a special one-night-only concert at Mars Landing Galleries. Civil Disobedience is a project bowing to the politically conscious underground jazz of 1960s New York City. You'll hear music from progressive composers such as Bobby Hutcherson, Jackie McLean, Stanley Cowell, Howard Land, Joe Chambers, and James Spaulding. Much of their music wasn't released on record till decades later, and you can hear New York musicians performing it live January 24th. Seating is intimate and limited. For tickets and details, go to marslandinggalleries.com.
I am a maker, a builder, a baker, although sometimes my messes are all that you'll find.
Joe Minicozzi is an architect and urban planner by training, but he really could be an investigative journalist. His research has revealed that homes and land with the highest market values are systemically underassessed and undertaxed, while homes and land with the lowest market values are overtaxed. His findings show that's true in Buncombe County and each of the 18 counties in western North Carolina. By his findings, Buncombe County's tax assessors are leaving more than $7 million in tax revenue on the table every year, money they can legally collect, while owners of property at the bottom of the economic strata are paying as much as twice per square foot and acre as their more well-off counterparts.
I went and met with the county assessor, and I asked her, "Can you explain this to me?" And her response, and I quote, was, "Those people use more police services." I live, breathe, sleep this stuff. That person should be living, breathing, sleeping that stuff. That should be quantifiable data. There should be no bias. It should be fair and equitable. Yet you see a human operating with biases right in front of you.
I'm Matt Peiken, and this is The Overlook, a podcast about the news, arts, issues, and trends of Asheville, North Carolina. My guest today, Joe Minicozzi, is the founder of a consulting firm called Urban 3, which helps cities all over the country understand economic issues that drive land use decisions. Today, he lays out for all of us what he says he's already laid out in great detail to county commissioners and the county assessor. He talks about long-entrenched biases and arbitrary processes baked into how properties are assessed for taxation. We go through some stunning numbers and the economic costs in a cash-starved county. Minicozzi also answers this question: why and how is this inequity allowed to continue? Hey, Overlook audience, did you know that every month I produce more than 400 minutes of exclusive local content relevant to life in Asheville? The Overlook is a one-man band, well, along with the fantastic, generous guests I invite onto the show, but my point is I'm delivering something Asheville has never had before. If you value the Overlook, if it makes you a more informed and engaged citizen, consider joining my Patreon campaign. You can be a sustaining member for as little as $5 a month. Your support would mean the world to me. To learn more, go to patreon.com/The Overlook Podcast. I have not reached out yet to Buncombe County officials to invite them onto my show to address this specific topic and Joe Minicozzi's research. I'm sending those invitations today to Brownie Newman, who chairs the Board of Commissioners, and Assessor Keith Miller. I began this conversation by asking Joe Minicozzi how he even began to suspect there were vast disparities and inequities about how properties are assessed for taxation. We did talk about this disparity when it comes to commercial properties, but I've edited our conversation here to focus on residential properties.
Flashback to 2009. One of it was when you practice in an environment as a designer, you better be equipped to understand all the forces at nature to make design happen. So you should be asking these questions. A lot of times in design school, you're not trained in the economic side. I was fortunate to get that training. And also, once I figured it out and was like, oh, this is just math, I was curious to start getting involved in those types of careers. So that's a little non-traditional. But I also knew designers that were doing great design. I was like, why isn't this sticking? Why isn't it happening? And they would be told, we can't afford it, or there's not the financial means to do this. So there are financial structures that were keeping it from happening. Flash forward to Julian Price and Pat Whalen with public interest projects. Pat was developing with Julian's trust. So Julian had invested money into public interest projects, so Pat didn't have to go through conventional means, through the banks or anything like that. If they wanted to fix a building downtown, they could fix it. But just the silliness that happens in the industry. So the Malaprops building was another building of public interest projects. That whole building that Malaprops is in was designed to be housing upstairs. So if you put people downtown, things will happen. In a downtown environment, there's this trade-off. I get less space, I have a smaller unit to live in, but I buy into a public realm. So that walkability should be there for me to get out and walk around. I should be able to walk to a restaurant, a bar, a nightclub. So that person in the downtown has a different type of market performance. You're going to be looking for different things. It's like a different species of animal, if you will.
That's why some people want to live downtown. Some people want to live 30 miles outside of downtown.
Good. And you should pay your own way to live out there.
Right.
The same way people downtown should pay their own way. And what I was seeing with the economic side of it was that downtown was paying more than its fair share and the suburbs weren't. So that's the birth of Urban 3, is that we were explaining that to people, is let's follow the money to understand how a city is designed. That starts with property taxes.
And you've been hired in 42 states to do work, yet you looked at what's happening right here in your backyard in Western North Carolina, Buncombe County. Was this just of your own curiosity, or were you hired by Buncombe County or any Western North Carolina counties to look into this?
I'm a resident shareholder of Asheville. It's like I'm also a resident of Buncombe County, so I am a citizen in both of those two corporations. And so as a citizen, I have expectations of my government. I take that very seriously. As a citizen, you should be involved and know what's going on in your community, and you should demand a better practice of governance. And that takes participation. You have to understand what's going on to be allowed to have comment in it. I've always been involved actively in Asheville since I moved here. And in 2003, when I moved here, there was discussion about I-26 and widening it. And coming here from another city and just realizing citizens were actually with it and explaining how just adding more lanes isn't going to solve the problem. That's called induced demand. When you add lanes, it basically causes more sprawl. So there are people here that it induces it. So we're going to witness, you and I are going to witness in our lifetime, the destruction of Mills River because of the widening of the highway.
Explain how that happens. How does widening an interstate induce sprawl?
It's called the Geron's paradox, I think. Or Chevron or Geron's paradox. But basically, if I facilitate your ease of commute, if I remove that barrier and that pain, people will be like, oh, I have a 5-minute commute into downtown from Mills River. Guess what? You're not going to be the only person that's going to figure that out. There are going to be farmers that are going to sell their lands to subdivisions, and we're going to go from tomatoes to subdivisions, which is a bump in taxes. But the cost to deliver that service to those houses, a tomato doesn't go to school. A tomato doesn't call the police. So all of that stuff happens. We take on all these burdens. Also, the developers give you the roads, the community the roads, and that becomes your obligation to pay for them 10, 20 years down the road when those roads come calling that they need to be fixed. At that time, that developer's out the door. That's the reason why there's a cost to sprawl. And again, this is all data. The Nixon administration, seriously, the Nixon administration published this in 1973.
Wow.
On the consequences of this stuff.
I had not connected the dots. I had not ever thought about how highway widening, and that makes complete sense, that suddenly Mills River becomes a more attractive place to live for people who are going to commute into Asheville because it cuts the commute down X%.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating.
It's the perverse incentive to the things that we think we want and the actual cost and consequences to them. So I want to eat ice cream and lobster every single day. I want to be 6 foot tall and have a full head of hair. I think you should pay for that. And that's what we do, is we don't understand the cost and consequences of those choices. And again, that's what our firm does day to day, is we explain that to people. So we've done, in flashback to that I-26 project, it was comical. Like, they were plowing the highway into the Burton Street neighborhood. And you move here, it's 2003, this isn't 1950. And I'm just looking at this going, where the hell, what planet is this that we're plowing a highway into the Burton Street neighborhood? And I lived in West Asheville at the time, and I looked at the real estate valuation of my house in Brucemont Circle versus a house in Burton Street next to the Burton Street Community Center. And then I grabbed a house up on Town Mountain Road. And looking at the land value per acre, my house was, I think, $135,000 an acre. The Burton Street neighborhood house was $235,000 an acre. And this is 2009. This is in the recession. And it was just mind-blowing to me. I'm like, how is their dirt worth more than my dirt, right? This is just land, no building. And then I grabbed a property on top of Town Mountain Road, and it was $56,000 an acre.
Wait, this is just for the land?
Just for the land.
And that's clearly marked that this is just the land assessment. I imagine you must have asked whoever was the tax assessor at the time, right? That would have been the first question. Why is there this difference? Is that what you asked?
That's funny. Yes, I did. I went and met with the county assessor, and I asked her, can you explain this to me? And her response, and I quote, was, those people use more police services.
Wow.
Yeah. And I turned to her and I said, first of all, those people are over-policed, A. B, I wasn't aware that the county cares about the city's police department. C, what about pumping water to the top of the mountain on that person on top of the mountain? That seems a little bit biased that you'd have that opinion.
And subjective.
Correct.
There's no quantifiable data, no public policy that has been put forward around this. It's just something, it sounds like arbitrary, that the tax assessor decided. Is it as simple as that it was that arbitrary?
Oh, and that's funny that you say that. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, this is, I live, breathe, sleep this stuff. That person should be living, breathing, sleeping that stuff. That should be quantifiable data. There should be no bias. It should be fair and equitable. Yet you see a human operating with biases right in front of you. Now, the thing is, so I called her on it. And I said, that sounds a little racist, right? And she's like, I'd like to walk that back. I'm like, you probably should. And I said, so why is this? And she's like, well, I don't know. Now, that should have been a gravity lightning strike moment in somebody's brain that, like, the system is messed up.
And the implications are huge. This isn't a trivial policy that she sounds like, at least on her own, enacted, or if she had the permission to do so beneath the table from county commissioners or others. But this isn't trivial.
How does systemic bias happen? In her defense, what does it take to become an assessor? I've got a graduate degree in urban design, right? I took a master's program to do city planning for architects, basically. Now, in that, I took real estate development courses, planning law, real estate law, all sorts of other things. For someone to become an assessor, you basically just have to pass a test from the International Association of Assessing Officers Conference.
It sounds like how somebody becomes an appraiser. You take a course.
Same organization, actually.
Wow.
So and I'm a member of this organization. After that talk with the assessor, I went and presented at an assessors conference, and it presented these very questions to them. Their magazine is called Fair and Equitable, and I asked them, how is this fair and how is it equitable? Now, to their credit, they're like, that's not right. That's not the proper way of doing things. And they can't police everybody in the community. And you can't, in her defense, there's only 20 people working in the county's assessment office. They're doing all that they can.
And
so
these are the people who are responsible, 20 people responsible for actually conducting valuations.
250,000 parcels in our county.
And they have to go out periodically.
They don't have time to.
So what are they relying on for their assessments?
The best thing that they can do is they've got a software called the CAMA model. It's a computer automated mass appraisal model. And then they try to keep up with the data. They're trying to keep on. But also you get passed on intergenerational rules of thumb, right? So she may have been trained by somebody before her. This is what's going on. This is why the data looks messed up. And that's just really lazy intellectually, to just not question that or not be curious or not hear the bias in that statement. Now, it's easier for us I would say that we're probably privileged individuals, we're both white, to look at the system now in 2023 and use this language and terminology and see it with clear eyes.
Yeah, we might not have even a decade ago used that language.
Correct.
It's different then. And then what year was this that you talked with her?
2009.
Gosh, 14 years ago at this point. So whether she set this policy herself or was going by what was done by predecessors, or she had the imprimatur of county commissioners to continue operating this way, she's not the one in charge. So there are county commissioners, there are people who oversee that department, right?
Yeah, but in their defense, they're delivered a 655-page report every time the reassessments happen. They're not really explained what's going on. Seriously, pull the assessment report. I've read every 655 pages of it.
Oh my gosh.
Most of it is nonsense. But if that's what they're doing, is this rote process of reproducing that 600-something page document every 4 years, and then handing it to the commissioners. You've got a commission agenda. You've got like a budget hearing. The sheriff did something weird. There's like lots going on. To sit there and go through and filter through and understand the assessment process isn't your top priority. You trust that person, they're doing the job. You're not hearing a lot of complaints. Right?
What you just said, not hearing a lot of complaints. I imagine, tell me if I'm wrong on this, until you had done your research on this of your own volition, nobody had this. It was just the way it was. People get their tax bills. They say, oh, gosh, my taxes are going up, or this is how much I'm paying. And nobody had thought, and certainly not to bring a studied academic process and context into this kind of research, right?
There are people out there doing it. Flash forward 2019, Minneapolis was the first city that asked us to analyze redlining. And we tried. We didn't really have – no one had asked us to do it before, so we're trying to figure out how do you follow the economic string of redlining, because redlining stopped in 1968.
At least
officially, but you start to see the same economic effects, that echo effect that happens. So on the northeast side of Minneapolis, high concentration is basically the black population on the northwest side of Minneapolis. You're still seeing the redline legacy effect of low value. A lot of it is if you spend 30 years, you wake up one day and there's a red boundary around your neighborhood in 1934, you can't sell your house. So those families that were redlined couldn't sell their house for 30-something years. In Asheville, we had a redline map. Burton Street was a redline neighborhood. So was the South Side. So the legacy effect that happens is if you can't sell your house to somebody in the open market in a secured mortgage, that house has to be passed around either through families or a predatory mortgage system or something. So usually you find the result of that is you don't see the cash flow, the equity flowing into the family, where I can get a home mortgage loan and fix the house, right? If I don't have access to money, I can't fix the house. So you find in these neighborhoods a lot of decay where the houses fall down, you get vacant lots. So Burton Street was a class example of this. In 2009, there was a lot of missing parcels there because of that 30-year window of taking away mortgages in the neighborhood. So yes, redlining stopped in 1968, but that echo effect of losing the houses continued on.
And what seems to have continued on is also a certain prejudicial view of the Burton Street neighborhood because of what conditions some of the houses are in, maybe some of the prevalence of certain activity happening in the neighborhood that wasn't happening otherwise. Yeah. And that all, from what you're touching on, is contributing to this ongoing policy of just overtaxing people, homeowners in that neighborhood.
We found that the lowest 10% of properties are being overtaxed at about 120%. The highest value properties were being undervalued.
Let's put some broader context to the work that you did. You sent me a graphic that showed that for every dollar that homes are assessed in the upper economic strata, that homes in Buncombe County at the lower economic strata were assessed at $1.05.
I think it's $1.09.
Okay.
Yeah.
My point is, for every county, all 18 Western North Carolina counties had this same effect happening, whether it was taxed at just a little bit over or a lot over. McDowell County was a particular outlier. I think it was $2.18 for every dollar that of similar sized lot and property value at the upper economic strata. Homes in McDowell County at the lower economic strata were taxed at more than double. And this happened everywhere. So obviously this isn't solely a Buncombe County, Asheville problem.
No, so we had done this redlining analysis in Kansas City, Minneapolis. Flash forward, Asheville adopts reparations, the county adopts reparations. So I got together with my team and I was like, let's go ahead and do the analysis. The first rule of reparations is do no harm. The second rule is you find out who's winning and who's losing and you start to level the playing field. So let's provide the data so we can see what's happening. This is a gift.
Pro bono work.
Pro bono. We spent probably about 300 hours. I'd say the equivalent opportunity cost to my company was probably about $300,000 worth of time that we could have been off doing something else. But I live here. I value my community. I've been an activist and an advocate here in our community. The I-26 work that I did was all for free. The business improvement district work that I did was all for free. I was on 5 different nonprofit boards, the Downtown Association. I believe in this community, and I'm going to put my foot in and help in the process. So we did that. And I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I knew it wasn't going to be welcomed with open arms given my experiences with past projects here. But it was
not only that, but just given your experience and when you approached the county assessor back in 2009.
Correct. And when I met with Mr. Miller, who's our current assessor, I knew it was not going to be fun for him to have to go through this experience. And I also told him, I said, this isn't about you. This is about what's happening nationally. And we're not the only people that did this. Dr. Chris Berry from the University of Chicago did a nationwide report that validates our work. We've actually shared our work with Chris Berry, and he reviewed it and agrees with what we're doing. If you look at the Toronto Sun, there's an article about this right now where the newspaper actually did the analysis in the community. So we're witnessing a tipping point right now. I'm not proud of how the assessors organization is handling this right now, because they're sticking their heads in the sand. I'm seeing this a lot with all the assessors. Shoot the messenger rather than understand what's going on in the process.
When you approached our county assessor, current assessor, Mr. Miller, and this was after your research or during or before you were starting your research?
This was after. We did the research because the assessment was happening. It was like we pivoted quickly. I think we did this work probably in 3 or 4 months initially with Buncombe County. And so it was a fast burn for us because we were trying to get the county commissioners to not approve the current assessment. So we didn't know what the assessment values were until everybody else did in January 1st.
So you conducted this at a time when it was a period of reassessment, and you wanted to be out in front of that.
Correct.
And so what happened?
I met with every county commissioner but Commissioner Presley and showed them our analysis and said, I respectfully ask you to put a pause on the assessment process until we can figure out why this is happening. So that had a narrative to it is basically a PowerPoint presentation to them all. Their response was, thank you, we can't stop this snowball that's rolling downhill, so to speak. And they just went ahead and did the reevaluation with a caveat of, we'll investigate with what you're doing. We're going to create this ad hoc committee. First, they created a rebate program.
Rebate program for what?
Of low wealth properties, you could get a rebate in your taxes. Now, they funded that rebate program and the city put in some money too. Now, remember, when the county does this, when they set up the pricing structure, the city is a bubble within the county, right? So the city who adopted reparations, just by how the county prices things, makes the city guilty of breaking its reparations promise as well.
Right, by proxy. Was the rebate supposedly set up, we are going to rebate the difference on what the property should have been assessed at compared to what we found at properties at the upper economic strata? What were the figures of this rebate based on? Or were they also arbitrary?
Arbitrary. And it's
I'm laughing because I'm aghast.
$400,000 was the total rebate program.
Wait,
right?
for the whole, $400,000 total?
Yeah. Per year, the economic subsidy that we're giving the wealthy is $7 million a year. So let me get this straight. We've proven that there's inequity in the system. Your response is to underfund it and not even get close to that $7 million. And better yet, here's the deal. You, as a low wealth individual, have to apply to get the rebate. Do the high wealth individuals who currently get the rebate have to apply? No. So how is that even equitable?
Let's give some context here, too, because there could be the question, were homes at the upper economic strata undervalued, or were homes at the lower end overvalued? And from what your findings, you're saying both. And so you gave an example in the graphic you sent me. There was a home that was sold in 1 year, I think it was in 2020, for over $6 million, I think $6.2 million. The assessment that happened the following year only valued it at $4 million.
Correct.
That right there. So they have sales data to go on. So when you're asking, well, we have a 20-person department, how can we be asked to accurately assess properties all over this county when you have sales data that can be fed directly into your software, that you don't have to go out necessarily to assess if there are land and property records that you can go by? Am I being ridiculous in thinking that it's not necessarily easy, but the path to finding out value is right there in front of you?
Matt, you're getting a little emotional. I don't know. I'm feeling uncomfortable. I don't know.
Okay, so the county, according to you, said, look, we can't roll this back, that the process is already underway, or it's too late to do anything. We're going to give a rebate. Okay, and that the
rebate first should have been $7 million.
Yeah.
Period. It's like, here's the inequity in the system, match it.
Or retax the higher property? They say we undertaxed you.
The county could have done a number of things. They could have said, oh, our foul, we're going to do another reassessment next year. They don't have to wait 4 years to do the reassessment. That's their choice. The law allows them, they could do a reassessment every month if they wanted.
More after this. The First Look newsletter brings you news headlines from all over Asheville every weekday morning. You can scan it at a glance and see if there's something you've missed or just need to know more about. There are no ads disguised as stories, just the headlines in a quick, easy read. Get the First Look newsletter for free at podavl, that's podavl.com/newsletter. I've heard North Carolina called a mother may I state, where the state legislature determines so much of taxation. You're saying this is wholly within the county's powers to do something about
Correct.
it. Okay, so where we left off was with this rebate program of a token arbitrary amount. And you mentioned an ad hoc committee. What's that about?
The ad hoc committee was supposed to research the presentation that I gave to the commissioners and then have a discussion about the inequity in the system and what to do about it. What would be our recommendations to change?
Gotcha. So the rebate is like a temporary Band-Aid while this ad hoc committee does the research.
Matt, these things take time. We've got to just one step at a time. We just can't shift everything all at once. This is a government. We can't just move the boat that quickly. Would you be a little bit more patient, Matt? It's these steps that we need to do.
I understand. Okay, great.
This isn't Minneapolis.
Great. I don't know that that's a model that I want to hold up either. But, okay, the county says we need to study this. They form what you just termed an ad hoc committee. Who was on this committee to study your research?
One member of our team, Dr. Ori Baber, who was the partner in doing the analysis, so it was great that he was on. But, I was pretty appalled that two realtors from Christie's Real Estate were on the ad hoc committee. So this is a committee supposed to be discussing equity and, granted, yes, let's have somebody who represents high wealth properties on the committee, but two from the same firm. And what's their incentive to actually interrogate the system that their clients benefit from?
Why is anybody from that who is an interested party on this supposed committee that's all about digesting the results of your research? You would want supposedly objective, learned people to either verify or throw questions back and, impugn the research.
The county also hired an economic analyst with zero experience in property assessment to analyze our work.
Crazy. So
he even admitted that when in his presentation, he said, trust me, I don't know anything about property assessment. Take my word for it. That's his response.
How did that happen? Okay, so
how did nobody pay attention to this? Why was there no other citizens in the room watching this? This is all happening in plain sight.
So, Joe, okay, you have one of your Urban 3 colleagues who's on this ad hoc committee. There are two people from Christie's. There's somebody else who's supposedly in a position of expertise who admitted having no expertise. So what came out of this committee?
My opinion, nothing. Actually, I believe it was Commissioner Whitesides asked Jonathan Hunter, who was one of the realtors from Christie's. He presented their findings, and he asked him directly, did you analyze equity? And his response after hemming and hawing was no. So this is a committee that was started to look at the inequity that we exposed. I didn't get to deliver my presentation until they had met 10 times. You would think that you would start with my presentation as the launching point. In fact, when I presented, I said, here are the things that we uncovered. I said, my presentation should be the start of your conversation, not the end.
Your note to me made it pretty explicit that whether it was county commissioners or this committee, I want you to clarify for me, it seemed to deliberately not want to hear your findings, not
Correct.
Want you to present. Were these commissioners or the ad hoc committee?
It was the ad hoc committee.
Okay. So you were presenting, or you wanted to present to them, and they were deflective.
Correct. And I think it was Commissioner Newman that was like, he kept on emailing me. He's like, have you presented yet? And I'm like, no. Now, it's okay, dude. You're the chair of the county commission. You might want to talk to Avril Pinder. We're in a community that it's like, thanks to what Wanda Green did, we should all be asking questions of our government and paying attention. And here we have a new county manager. She's running how this committee works through the assessor. So it's between either the assessor or the county manager, I did talk with Averill, and I was like, you got to tell me what's up here. Why is this so difficult?
Yeah, but the committee is working on the behalf of the
Yeah,
commissioners.
so the commission should care about it.
So
Right.
why would Brownie Newman be so distanced from this? Do you think the
Have
committee
him sit in this chair and ask him. I don't know. I have to trust in their process and the decisions they're making. Now I get to hold them accountable at the back end. I am disappointed as a citizen in them not asking questions and not demanding. And this is a pretty significant thing. This is 40% of our revenue of running our county comes through property taxes. This is no small number.
40% of our revenue comes from taxes, and what is the numerical differentiation between if these properties were assessed at their true value, the higher economic strata homes, what do you think the county would be bringing in?
$222 million.
So we're leaving 220.
No, it says $220 million is in our property tax system, right?
Okay.
This equity transference of the poor paying the rich, basically, or subsidizing the rich. That's $7 million a year. Now, there's this one law that was created in like 1934 under the Machinery Act that says that when you sell your property, if I discover that you've improved your basement, let's say, and put in a rental apartment in the basement, and I discover that new value, I'm supposed to hit you with back taxes plus 5 years backward of saying you did this without a permit, you're guilty, so I'm going to hit you with this new value that you created because I was undertaxing you because I didn't see it as an assessor. Because when you pull a permit, the assessor gets to see what's going on and happening. So in their defense, they can't see what somebody does illegally. So the assessor presented 2% of the housing stock value. It was about $4.4 million of uncollected taxes out of 2%. You remember high school math.
I was terrible at math.
I was too, but it's real simple. If you put 2% over 4.4 million, 98% over X. You solve for X, right? That's
So-
$216 million of uncollected taxes. Now, let's say I'm wrong. I have 50% wrong on that. My math is 50% wrong. $110 million is still a lot of money that we're not collecting.
So just going off that, what we could quantifiably see of 2% was
4.4 million. That's
4.
111 school teachers.
that we were leaving on the table of under taxing of the upper economic value.
That's a gift to that
homes.
individual that violated our laws and didn't file a permit to do that addition.
And you made it clear in your note to me that in this county and city where we're scrambling for dollars to solve, you name the issues, whether it's affordable housing, homelessness, offering our law enforcement officers better pay, you name it. This is money that is legally right there for the county to assess, and not unfairly. Your work is based on fairness and equity that we're leaving there. The outrage seeps off the work. I feel it from you just in that work. Now, this happened 2019, 2020, right?
2021, we did the analysis. We presented it in 2021. The committee was created in 2022, and we're at where we're at. Every year, every January, when we choose not to do a reassessment, we are committing to this crime.
And now, have you had continued conversations with Brownie Newman, other county leaders about when are you going to do something about this? Or are they waiting for the ad hoc committee to produce a final report?
The ad hoc committee's gone. And I'll tell you, in my 10 years, I put 10 years in I-26. We don't need to get the highway the way that we did. I got together with a group of people and we produced a solution that was it was legal, it met the DOT's requirements, and it also would have saved our community a tremendous amount of destruction. The way that our city and our county boggled that along the way, and it was this whole, we'll fix it next year, we'll fix it. The more you delay that process, the more you entrench what the DOT wants to get done. So we're actually giving away our rights willingly and like in front of our community by inaction in our community. So when I started this process, I told Brownie, I was quite blunt. I said, look, I'm not going to do another I-26 project where this is going to be 10 years of my life. Here's the facts. We're going to give them to you, and I'm going to hold you accountable to actually doing something out of it this time. Don't ask me to be part of a committee for 10 years. This is not... And Brownie's, I consider a friend. Brownie was also part of the Western North Carolina Alliance back in the day. He's been down this I-26 fight. He knows what I'm talking about. So I would just hope that as a professional, I don't have time to burn on this stuff.
Why do you think there's been such inaction?
To me, it's fear. There's an assumption that the wealthy people are going to get the pickets and protest. Change doesn't happen willingly in this town and lots of places. Inertia of bureaucracy. Hey, audience, Biltmore Forest has lost $40 million of value in the last 10 years. It's actually devalued. Yeah. Apparently no one wants to live in Biltmore Forest. We need to start an urban renewal program to help these people out. But if you saw your tax values going down, would you complain? Would you call the assessor and protest your tax bill going down? No, of course not.
And you're saying, obviously, this has happened in broad daylight. This isn't hidden in the books.
No.
How can that be defensible just on the land alone? We don't know that maybe properties have been dilapidated and whatever. But
if you're overwhelmed in your job and I go and change that system, it's going to stir people up. Who are the people that can afford to hire somebody to pay a firm to go in, or an attorney or a real estate agent to go and protest your taxes? That's the folks that have the money to do so, right? It's just simple economics. If I'm paying $10,000 in taxes and I see my tax bill go up to $12,000 and it's going to be that way for 4 years, that's 4 times 2. That's $8 additional $1,000 that I now have to pay to the government that I didn't have to pay before. So I can hire you for $4,000 and save $4,000. It's economic calculus. A low wealth individual, somebody that's poor, doesn't have that revenue or resources to do it. They often don't have the time or connections to know that they can do it. I talked to my neighbor about this, who's a Vietnam War veteran, disabled, elder black man, and I asked him, I said, you should appeal your taxes. And he held up the tax form at me and waved it at me and said, do you think I'm going to get a fair shake? And I have to be honest with him, is yeah, when I get told to my face what that assessor told me about those people use more police services, how do you think he's going to get responded to? So the system actually weeds out the people who really should be protesting their tax system. This is a systemic oppression on how people run, how the government is run. You just can't see it when they're running it.
Yeah, you mentioned that in your note to me, that there's a blindness, that they can't see that. Or do you think that they can see it, but they don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the strength to single-handedly, like the assessor, for instance, he's the tip of this spear, but you're talking about this entire system that goes back many decades.
Look, I'm going to hold him accountable because right now he's at the tip of that spear. The same as, let's go back to Derek Chauvin. Do you think the Minneapolis Police Department hadn't heard that they had these issues before that incident happened with George Floyd? Of course they did. That was a problem. They couldn't get the system to change. But it was that moment that happened where we could all see it that made it real. Our job at Urban 3 is to make it so people can see it. And then let's deal with it. Are we going to be adults about it? Or are we going to go into duck and cover? And this isn't about any one individual, but once you start making those choices to do the wrong thing after you know you're doing the wrong thing, then I'm going to hold you accountable. So as far as I'm concerned, I went into it openly saying, let's do this, let's have this discussion. But after seeing I'll be honest, this is a very juvenile response to economic information where we should be having an equity conversation. And let's be adults about it. But now we're playing in the, don't be mean to somebody. I mean, your outrage is just happening now. I've had a couple of years to settle mine down.
Right.
But it's like, really, this is going to go on for more years?
In pinning it back to equity issues, you're really calling the county and city on the bald-faced hollowness of the rhetoric around equity.
Correct.
What do we mean around equity if this is something within our power, within our leaders' power? We don't need state legislative action on this. And it's hundreds of millions of dollars that we're talking about.
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
And you just talked about how the wealthy have the resources and the means to protest, or at least hire people to stand on the picket lines for them, because I don't know that they would do it themselves.
I honestly don't think they would complain if we were transparent and talked them through it.
Yeah, and if we showed the equity, right? We just showed, here's what land is assessed here. We should assess that here.
When I showed this to people in Biltmore Forest, like I've got friends that live there. I've actually gone and done presentations with some of them at their houses, and they're just like, this is messed up. This needs to change. This is wrong. So it's like, why? This is our government assuming that there's going to be a problem. So if you talk to them, if you explain to them, like most folks at the high wealth, and whenever I talk to them, and you talk to your friends, and they're just like, oh, my house is 80% of what the value should be. And I'm like, are you aware that in Shiloh, their houses are at 120%? And they're like, that's not right. I'm like, exactly. Shouldn't we all be 80%? Secondly, shouldn't we be assessing Airbnbs as hotels? I had a conversation with the assessor about this. I said, it's a house. I'm like, yes, it is a house, but it's being used as a hotel room. So when we go and look at hotels, do we call them apartments? because they could quite easily be apartments too, right?
Yeah.
There's a bathroom and
Is there a different way of assessing the value?
You're supposed to be assessed them commercially.
Oh,
so we're
okay.
supposed to be getting more money out of the Airbnbs because they're a commercial product. They're cash flowing. You and I, when we live in a house, we can't make money in that house, right? But if I lived right next door to you, I actually walked through Jonathan Hunter, the Christie's real estate person. I presented on, and seriously, folks, everybody on this radio, you can go and pull the ad hoc video. You'll actually see me present the Airbnb cash flow on a house that basically, in its 30-year mortgage that you and I would live in, is going to be netting about $7 million of revenue. Now, can any of us get $7 million out of our house while we're living in it? No. So you should be taxed on that, right? That's what the law says. You tax commercial properties at a commercial rate, which means you tax its income. For residential properties where you have a resident, somebody where you they live here, they work here, whatever, you do it on the value of the house, the object, the architecture, right? So the assessor, because Airbnbs apparently are a new thing, we haven't really thought about them. And this isn't in our assessment office's defense. We see this a lot with a lot of communities where they haven't adapted. They haven't pivoted to understand what Airbnbs are. So here in our community, it means something because we're a tourism town. We have a lot of units that are in that capacity. So when you and I compete for a house to go buy a house, we're competing against somebody else that can turn it into a hotel room. That drives the price up. So that inflates the value beyond what the real market value is. But we're stuck in that market bubble. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
We have to pay attention to these things because it affects how we pay for our government. My government should be bringing an A game to understand this too. It shouldn't be left to me, some random guy that happens to live here.
Right. You're not just a random guy. You come with a lot of knowledge and insight into this. Well, the powers that be know about your research. It's there for them. What do you think is going to happen? What is next?
I have no idea. These are state laws that we weren't even following. Also, at what point does patience turn into complicity? At what point does my inaction or me just waiting actually validates that we're still committing these crimes? It's criminal to overcharge somebody for their government when they have the least amount of resources to pay for their government. It's inept.
It's unethical.
It's ineptitude.
It's immoral.
It's immoral. I mean, there's lots of things that just my blood gets flowing on, and it's hard for me. And I'll be honest, I'm an Italian. It's I can't control.
I'm Jewish, so it's kind of
it
same
comes
thing.
out, right?
Yeah.
This isn't personal. We have to identify the fact that a lot of these systems were set up and conspire and collude together to cause a certain amount of separation and wealth. And zoning does it. All of Biltmore Forest is zoned R1. That's ridiculous because who can afford a 1 acre house? It's a class separation by design. That happened with zoning, different policies, and assessment is just another one of those silos that links up to separate people from their money.
Our new First Look newsletter gives you just a handful of daily headlines from around the local media landscape to get you on your morning. We also have a weekly newsletter devoted to all things The Overlook that hits you every Friday. Both are free and available at podavl.com/newsletter. And please support the show by going to our Patreon page at patreon.com/theoverlookpodcast. I want to thank my guest today, Joe Minicozzi of the consulting firm Urban 3. Again, I'll be inviting county commissioners onto my show to address everything we talked about today, and I'll update you on a future episode. Today's conversation happened inside the BB Theater in downtown Asheville, which owners Susan and Giles Collard have been so gracious enough to open to me to record my interviews. Our theme music for The Overlook, Maker's Song, comes courtesy of the Asheville band The Resonant Rogues. The Overlook is a production of Podcast Asheville. New episodes are available every Monday through Thursday morning. I'm Matt Peiken, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Overlook.
Curious how the word y'all has conquered the English-speaking world? Ever wonder why there are so many dollar stores and what they mean to the American landscape? I'm Anissa Khalifa, host of the new podcast, The Broadside, from North Carolina Public Radio. We explore stories at the heart of the American South. Each week, we go beyond the headlines and cover a single topic that impacts our region, and explain how it reverberates across the country. Follow The Broadside wherever you get your podcasts.